Hello, and welcome to a brand new podcast called Kirk Chats, a ministry of Kirk in the Hills. I am so excited to be with you with my first guest, Beverly Cornelius, who also happens to be my grandmother. I'm your host, Reverend Jasmine Smart, and we'll be going through a variety of guests in this series, talking about faith, life, and our changing world. So welcome to my grandma.
Thank you, Jasmine. It's good to be with you here in Michigan.
In Michigan, yes. She's visiting from Oregon this weekend. Today we'll be talking about faith and some of the most important faith journeys in both of our lives, but especially in my grandma's life. And one thing that I've asked her to do as kind of a get to know you exercise is to bring an object that is important to you that has something to do with your faith. So can you please describe what you brought and why it's important?
And I think when she asked me first the question or the statement, she said, bring something that you would take if you were only could take one object and had to leave in a fire or whatever, in a disaster. And this, my Bible, would be what I would take. I didn't think about it for very long at all, except I got this Bible in 1959 when I was 16 from my mother, and I used it for almost 40 years. But lately, after the death of my husband, I then picked up his Bible that I had given him because it was large print. And now just recently, my mother died, so I've been using her Bible. But when I went back and thought about it, this would be the Bible that I would take. And it feels so good in my hands. And I had forgotten how nice it feels. The other two Bibles I'm using are much larger. And of course, this is finer print. And now, of course, I need glasses. But I think I would go back and take this Bible, but I've thought about it a lot. If I were in a place where I could just have one book or one item, it has always been my Bible. Mm-hmm. And I have a poem in the front of it, in fact, a couple of them, that says, we've traveled together, my Bible and I, through stormy weather, and then on it goes. But this Bible is very dog-eared and torn, but it means a lot to me, and I've written quite a few notes on the inside of it, starting in 1959, and it's just like a friend, going back to visit a friend. And by holding it, it's very special to me.
Yeah. I mean, Bibles now are everywhere. You go to the hotel and there's a Gideon's, well, most hotels still have them.
Yes.
A Gideon's Bible there. But what you're describing is kind of these different relational components to it as well.
Exactly.
So talking about with John's or with your mom's, yes, and kind of having a Bible someone else had being important. But then this one was given to you when you were how old?
16.
And so just that kind of formative time in your life. And
well, I know it wasn't my first, and I've tried to think what my first Bible was. I'm sure it was black, but this one just is the one that has stayed with me because I don't have any of the others. But I have multiple Bibles. My mother had so many Bibles, and I have a stack of Bibles. Mm-hmm. But and I look at them, and different versions have been very helpful when I've read and studied something. But when I memorized as a child or as a young person, it was King James. So that is what this is, obviously, King James.
Right. Yeah, we've talked about before how because you've been a Christian your whole life and you've read the Bible daily,
yes,
pretty much really regularly, that sometimes, and I know you love to read the Psalms a lot too, but some of the newer translations saying it in a different way kind of helps helps it keep fresh, and it hits you in a different way.
That is true. But in memorizing, it's always what you learned as a child is what you go back to in memorization.
Yeah.
And I pick that up when I read, especially like the 91st Psalm or many of the Psalms that I memorized.
Like if you hear it in church in a different translation, you're
And
like,
I'm
that's
going,
not quite right.
No, that's not quite right.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But-
and for me, it was the NIV was
Yeah.
what I grew up in.
Yeah.
But when I prepare a sermon or something, sometimes I do go to the King James because it's so lyrical and there's a lot of poetry. It feels like they kind of kept that because it's older for us, right? And the these and thous feel more poetic. But then, just I mean, because as a sermon writer, you kind of want to check, well, what were they really trying to mean?
Okay.
And having multiple words for something kind of helps with that as well, too.
Yes.
Well, let's switch gears and we'll talk about our relationship a little bit. So I went to live with you when I was about 11 years old. 12 years old, yeah.
You came on your 12th birthday
Okay.
because I had scheduled a trip for the two of us to go to Disneyland.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we left that day on your 12th birthday. And actually, you didn't realize it at the time, but when we left Oregon to go to California, I knew you were coming to live with me, but you did
I
not
didn't
know
know
it
yet. Okay.
You did
okay.
not know it yet.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a
Yeah.
kind of a different time, but
make sure we could get along well, like on vacation.
well,
If we couldn't
yes.
get along well on vacation, how were we going to do day to
Yes,
day to day?
but Jasmine, I had, since the day I met you, you came to my heart and you stayed with me often, and I often just, can I have Jasmine? Because when it comes down to it, you are my only blood grandchild, though I have 40 kids that call me grandma that came by different stations in life. But having a blood grandchild is just the caption to being called grandma.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, being 12, a tween, a teenager,
Yeah,
you know, those are kind of hard years anyways. And
Yes.
so to kind of have, you know, I don't know, it just felt for me like, you know, all my friends seem to have stable mother, father, Christian parents. I started going to Christian school. So that was kind of part of why
That's
I went, I
Yes.
think, because you were able to take me to school. There wasn't a local bus or anything like that,
No.
but we committed together, kind of.
Yes.
I said I wanted to go,
Yes.
and you made it
Yes.
happen. And so,
Well, in fact, if I can interrupt you, when you were in 5th grade, you said to me, Grandma, I'd like to go to a school where I can take my Bible. And boy, I won't forget the first day or two you went to a Christian school that we put you in, and you were so excited when you came home.
Yeah.
You were so excited over being able to take the Bible, to study the Bible, and to have a good Bible teacher in junior high, which to me is the most formative years of all the school years. I mean, it's the worst, I guess I should say. It's that in between grade school and high school, and it's kind of the worst time in a child's life, I think.
Right. Yeah. So I won, you know, as early as 5th grade, which in our school system, 7th grade became middle school. But we did, you know, my dad decided, at least in my recollection,
Right.
it's like, I don't want to take you out of elementary school.
Right. Yeah, you were doing well.
Finish there,
Yeah.
and then after the 6th grade year,
Yeah.
we could talk about switching.
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, I had a great Bible teacher. He was one of my good friend's dads. So he taught me Greek from really early,
Yes,
Greek and
yeah.
Hebrew. So when I went to seminary years later and we started reading Genesis 1, I was like, oh, I remember this from way back then.
Good, yes.
So yeah, the kind of just natural bent I had in me that wanted to study. And because my parents weren't actively practicing Christians, I didn't get that at home. So it kind of was like a whole world changing, right? I went to Christian school. I lived with you.
Yes.
I thought for the longest time that all Christians only listen to Christian music because
Grandma only listened to Christian music.
Yes, in the car every time you'd pick me up for the weekend or whatever, you'd be having the gospel music on, you'd be singing along.
Good.
And so I realized once I went to Christian school, not every Christian does that, but that was really formative. That all of a sudden it went from just getting an hour a week on Sunday morning, or the time we had on weekends, to getting to be really explore what being a Christian meant 24/7. I felt like, but how was that like for you? Because being in your older adulthood, having thought you raised your kids already, and then you get a 12-year-old who you now get to raise then for the next...
It could have been stressful, but I credit you, Jasmine, for not making it stressful, because I remember very little times of feeling stressed about it. And this is kind of going a step backwards, but I prayed for you from the day I met you. And I prayed for my grandchild and my grandchildren every day. And to me, that made God knew that it was going to be a transforming situation. So I think he created that ahead of time and made it peaceable and livable, and it was much easier with you than it was with my own kids, so which I don't think in this day and age would necessarily be true. But it seems like you were so good, and you had a heart for the Lord, I could tell, and that's exactly what I prayed for. Give her a heart for you, God. And he did. Yeah. So people out there, grandparents especially, pray for your grandkids.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's true. I think temperament probably had a hand in it, but also you've done it before, so you could kind of learn from what had happened before. And
yes, that's true.
But recognizing that, I feel like I was kind of, because my home life was so unstable at times, like I had this independence. Like I remember I really wanted to drive as soon as I possibly could, right? I went to racing camp as a 14-year-old or something.
We said.
Right. So I think just like you allowed me independence, a certain level of
Exactly,
independence.
and as soon as you were 15, I started letting you drive, and we got you a car as soon as you were 16, and and you drove yourself to school then.
Yeah, right.
Which was, what, about 10 miles?
Yeah.
One way?
It was, right. Yeah, we lived kind of in the country, so it was a bit of a drive, but good.
And,
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't think I would be who I am without that experience and without having that kind of foundation and the early schooling that led to me being able to go to seminary and not Bible college, but Christian college and things like that too. Yeah. Well, let's go back to when you were young, and because you have been a Christian pretty much your whole life, right? Yes. But what was kind of the moment for you? I feel like you were about 4 years old, you've told me.
Well, I don't know, but it seemed to me, I can remember I was thinking I was very young. I can't remember, I think it was probably a little older than 4, maybe 6 or so. But we went to a little country church, and I can remember praying at the bench of the front row on the left-hand side, if you're looking towards the pulpit. On the front row, I can remember kneeling and praying and asking Jesus, to come into my heart, or telling me, just making that commitment. And it seems like it was always a commitment. Did I do everything right and live for him every day? No, not at all. But I always had a very foundational rock within me. I knew that I could not be moved away from my faith. And I have always felt like that. And I don't know if other people feel that way or not. I've never really asked anybody, but I feel very solid rock inside that my faith cannot leave me, will not leave me.
Yeah.
So that has been steadfast, like drove a stake in the ground and saying, this is it. And
yeah. So was this, because I know your dad was a preacher.
yes.
So was he preaching at this church? Or
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
It was a little country church, and there were 13 different denominations. So there was a little bit of everybody there.
Right.
So there was no...
Yeah, in the country, you had to just get along.
Yes,
Could it be
was
Presbyterians and Lutherans?
Yeah, we had a little bit of everybody there.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was good foundational for me as a child.
To be in church every week and...
To be in church every week. And like I say, I read my Bible, and sometimes it was out of duty. But I can remember saying, okay, you're going to do this because it will set a precipice, or it will...
Precedent, for your life, and just
yes,
kind of set the habit.
If I keep doing it, whether I really feel like it or not, it will become a habit. And it has. And I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, if you don't get a chance to read for whatever reason, you feel like something's missing, or...
I do, and the older I've gotten, the more I feel like that way. And the same with prayer. Now, you haven't said anything about prayer, but if I don't do my prayer, and I have a little note in the front of my Bible about if I don't have my prayer time and my reading time, there's something missing. There is absolutely something missing. And the older I've gotten, of course, the more I feel that way, and the more I've gotten into prayer. But as I said at Grandma's service, she was my teacher in a way, because she would pray every day and read her Bible, and one of the best spots for her was behind the wood stove. We lived in a shack that was over 100 years old. It was 2 rooms. It had no running water. It had a light bulb coming from the ceiling that was powered by a power plant for a while, for a generator for a while. But I can still remember, and I can see her reading her Bible and praying, or hear her praying in the bedroom, the one bedroom that it was.
So she'd pray out loud.
Yes, she would pray out loud then. But just seeing her Bible and her blanket and the cat under the stove behind the old wood stove. A real cat, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Okay. Behind the wood stove. That was something that I have carried with me all these years and tried to model in a way.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful for that memory.
Right. So in addition to your dad being the preacher, your mom, her faith was very strong.
Very strong.
And she would live that out. And she would preach too.
Yes, Mother got to the point where she would preach, because though Daddy was the preacher, he had to make a living. He worked, he not only carried the church, and I think he got $20 or $25 a week then, but then he worked in a sawmill in town, and eventually he had his own sawmill. And he cut timber on the place. So he worked very hard. And in some ways, Mother was more the model of, because she didn't work outside the home. She had more time to,
typical pastor who gets to sit in the study and read. And
yeah. Mother would have prayer and read the Bible with us, or read a Bible story with us, my brother and I, before we went to school. And I did that some with my kids, but I'm sorry to say I didn't do it all the time.
Yeah. I remember doing that with we carpooled, and with the Mormon family we carpooled with, they would always do that because they would have, like, I don't know if it was called confirmation, but some mornings they'd get up at like 6-7 a.m. and have confirmation for an hour before going to school. And
Yes, yeah.
it was a very different commitment.
It was, but it's a commitment that would behoove us all to do.
Yeah.
Really.
All right, well, with that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back and keep talking about some of your background and different stories you have with faith.
Okay.
Welcome back. I'm here with my grandmother, Beverly, and we're here talking about faith and life and our changing world. We've been talking about different stories we have from our lives and faith, and one thing that you've mentioned with the Bible is reading the Bible of your husband and your mother and different people who've been important to you. And I know 2019 and 2021, this season has been a season of loss for you. And but you talked about faith just kind of being this foundation that was unshakable.
Correct.
And I don't think everyone does feel that way. For some people with grief or something, that can be a moment they are shaken. Yeah. But tell us how you've been in the midst of these different losses.
Yes, loss and grief. And I've even led a grief class. And yet sometimes I don't think that I have grieved actually enough, or like supposedly people think you should grieve. But everybody does it in their own way, and that is very important to remember for all of us as we get older. And actually I have lost 3 husbands. I've been with all 3 of them when they've passed. And that's something that I treasure as a gift. Very special. But yeah, in 98, I lost a husband and then lost another one. And then in 2019, lost John, and I had been with him for over 20 years, so he was the longest, it seemed like, and the last, and I probably learned the most from him. And he was not of my faith. He was
Catholic?
Yes, he was Catholic. And I learned so much. I just feel like he taught me so much. And I have one of his Catholic Bibles. That I look at every now and then too, and I have learned from that.
I think it went both ways, because I feel like when I went to live with you both, it felt to me like he didn't read his Bible that often, right? Compared to you. But then at times like Christmas or, the Advent wreath became something that you both practiced together, and you could kind of bring faith together in those times.
And that is true. This Bible that he has, that I look at now and then, he got that several years ago. But before that, his Bible was one that he kept in his closet, and it was a family Bible type thing. And we never looked at it except at Advent time. But he did get so he would read his Bible. So you're right, Jasmine. It kind of went both ways. And of course, after he was gone, I thought about it, and I wish that I had been bolder and said, hey, let's do more of this together. Let's do it on a regular basis, where it wasn't regular, but we did through the seasons of the year and through some of the seasons of our life, we did do more of it together. And it taught both of us, I think. And we appreciated
Yeah,
it
and
more.
I think his faith was maybe quieter, but he was very committed. Every
Yes,
week he'd go
yes.
to church. If he was going golfing or duck hunting on Sunday, he'd go Saturday night to mass, right?
Yes, he would. And I have to tell you a funny story. The only time that he lied to me,
Okay.
he went duck hunting instead of going to church on one Sunday morning.
Uh-huh.
And he always went to mass. He always. In fact, I would go with him at times, I've gone with him. But he finally got this one time, and I asked him, I said, "Did you go to church today?" And I don't know if it was the duck hunting clothes he had on or what, it was a giveaway. And he finally admitted to me that he had lied to me, and he hadn't
That was the only
gone.
time, though. That's
As
pretty
far
impressive.
as I know, that's the only time
Yeah,
that he
that's good.
fibbed.
Yeah, right. And then most recently, back in April, your mother
Yes.
passed away.
Yes.
She was 90.
Mother passed away at 98 and 3/4
Yeah,
or
almost
whatever.
99, right?
And we had her memorial because of COVID, and she died just natural causes. It wasn't COVID. But like I said, my husband died like a year and a half before Mother, and John had kind of a running thing. He'd always say, well, he was going first, and I'd say, no, you're not. Mother is. So it got to be a joke to me. I'd say something about who's on first, and he would say he was.
Yeah.
But so I was, and we went through medical issues with him, and so I was taking care of him, and I had Mother in a assisted living at that point, but I did a lot of the assistance in her living.
Yeah.
And I would leave my husband feeling ill, lying on the couch, and go down to where Mother was, which was only a couple miles. And it got to be a time of a real pull inside of me. And there was a period of time where I felt like an ambulance chaser, because 3 times I called the ambulance for my husband. 3 times I called the ambulance for my mother, and she almost died of anaphylactic shock. But they finally figured out why. But Mother did live longer than John. And we had her memorial on August 7th this last year of 2021, and that was Jasmine. It was her suggestion, and I was so grateful you suggested that, because we couldn't have it right away, because it was the end of April. She had died. We could not have her funeral right away. And so when she said, well, you just ought to have it on Grandma's birthday, and I go, fantastic. And it worked out great because it was on a Saturday, and it was good timing, and I had several months to plan. And I knew I would give the eulogy, and I'm an emotional crier.
She's doing really well today.
But I felt like that there's no way I could make it through a eulogy or through her service.
Right.
But I did. I prayed about it, and the Lord just poured His Holy Spirit in me, and I didn't cry. I started to once, and just 10 seconds maybe.
Yeah.
And I got it back together, but to me that was just the Lord. But her service was very special, and Jasmine came, and she was a part of it, and that was so great.
Yeah.
But and in some ways, of course, I feel like I miss her more than I've missed my husband's death. But when you think about it, okay, here I go. I had her with me for over 78 years, where with John I had for 20 years. So
Right.
that, to me, that makes sense. And Mother and I were close, and yet we had our differences. But it came down to the last, I was all she had. My brother had died. Her husband's had died. So I was all she had. And we became very close through that as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you said before to not feel pressured by what people think grief should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, I mean, COVID has just kind of thrown grief into a whole. I'm grateful that you were able to be with her when she died, because for part of 2020 you were not able to see her.
That is right. They kicked me out.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad, to be honest, that John passed away before that, because
I am too.
He would have not liked being stuck at home.
He would not have survived the COVID as well.
Yeah,
as he
emotionally
did.
and mentally.
Yeah, because he passed several months before they put the clamp down.
Right.
And so that was, I've been thankful for that too. I've been very thankful.
Yeah. But then, I mean, what you're saying in terms of, balancing, it feels like for you, because right after John died, you had been caretaking for your mom, and
right.
You still were. And
I
so,
still was.
in a way, I mean, it was a relief that he wasn't sick and wasn't suffering anymore. You could focus a little bit. But now that you're on your own, you don't have to do this caretaking 24/7.
Not for two people.
Right,
anyway.
right. The grief can kind of come in whatever way it does, right? And just let it come. And I think sometimes people talk about like the stages of grief, like they're boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
But to me, it feels more accurate to say it's more like a spiral. Like maybe you'll get some of those emotions. Maybe you won't have any like of anger or denial or whatever, but you'll kind of pass it at various times. Maybe a important date or,
and then you loop back around to it.
And I've also seen that sometimes, it talks about, well, the grief might not go away, but if you imagine it like a ball of grief, and for now your box holding that ball, there's not room for very much else right after someone's died. So it kind of takes up the whole space. But over time, your box gets bigger. So the grief is still there, but you have room for other things to come in.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
The grief stays. Yeah, that's very good.
And maybe it does get smaller, but I like kind of that, especially if it's someone, like you said, your mom, who you had with you for 78 years of your life.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to some other aspects of your faith. I know that music is really important to you, and that and in some ways, to me, it feels like the best music are the ones that take scripture. And, I know you have a lot of scripture memorized, but for most of us, we remember the music of our songs, our faith songs. So is there any particular song that really stands out to you, or is it kind of just the whole spirit of singing?
It's the worship songs. And this morning at church, we sang "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." And that was just like an old hymn that just, I could identify with that.
Right.
And there's many of them that, I identified with. Some of the newer music that you listen to, I don't quite identify with that, but every once in a while I hear something and I'm going, wow, that is good. Mm-hmm. So there is much, and yes, there was, and in looking, that reminds me, looking at Grandma's Bible, she had a lot of verses underlined, and then she would put a parentheses around and say song, and many of them were songs that we sang, were the scripture. Mm-hmm. So yes, music has always been important to me. In the latter years, I haven't listened to it as much as I would have liked, because it bothered, if my husband was home and he was retired, I couldn't do that. So I felt like I couldn't do it, but I could do it when I had my own worship time, or when I was in a car that had a CD or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you kind of just took advantage of the time and kind of made any time or space prayerful if you wanted.
And that's one of the things I've done since he has passed away. I have a tape recorder, old fashioned tape recorder, and old cassette tapes at my bedside, and I almost every night. But now that I've learned to use my iPhone a little bit, I am also getting music on it, and I have heard some great...
search for the things that you don't have.
Yes. So, yes, I am now have music has come back around to me, and I'm listening to it in a different way, but it's been really a blessing to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now you've moved to a retirement center and you live on your own.
Well, I live in senior living.
Senior living.
Yeah.
And but I imagine you don't really feel lonely. You told me once you're the happiest you've been in a long time. Or ever.
I do not feel lonely. Every once in a while, of course, I get a feeling that comes over me. Why am I here? Or am I doing the right thing? But I felt like I needed to sell our place that we had.
It was really big.
Yeah, we had 3 acres and a 3-story house, old house. And I just didn't feel like I could keep that up. I started working on it, I think, the day after John's funeral. Just started with the first drawer.
Yeah.
And if you remember
yes,
the drawer in the kitchen that
right.
had all this junk in it,
yeah,
that was the first drawer I cleaned out, able to throw away some of it. And one thing about it, I found out it was easier to throw away some of his stuff than it was mine.
That tends to be how it goes.
But he was not a hoarder or a collector or anything like
No.
that, and I have learned not to be. But it took me a good 6 or 8 months to actually get the place up and ready for sale. And I did most of the work myself. And I tell people I did concrete work, I did insulation work, and I did sanding the window seals and painting them and things like that. And I go, oh, really? Yeah. And then I had all the basement and everything to clean out. And John used to say to me, he said, I feel so bad to leave you with this mess. And I'd say, what mess? I realized what the mess was after he was gone, and I was cleaning it out. Mm-hmm. Because cleaning his shop and his rooms and stuff, it was a mess. Some of those things he had packed around for 60 years, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, I got it done, and that's why I turned gray overnight almost, I say. I was coloring my hair some, but it wasn't that gray compared to now. And I stopped coloring my hair, and this is what it's ended up. But I say, I deserve it. I earned it.
You earned them.
Yeah. I earned this by cleaning up the place and getting it ready for sale. Mm-hmm. And thankfully it sold just before COVID got really bad. Mm-hmm. So I was thankful for that. And then the other day when I drove back up there to see a neighbor, I said, oh my goodness, this looks terrible, because they're not keeping it up. And I just felt so bad. And the Lord said to me, you wanted to sell it, didn't you? Well, you got your money, didn't you? Okay, so keep still. It's not yours anymore.
Your problem. Yeah.
So, and for that reason, I'm very thankful to be where I'm at. I have a 1-bedroom small apartment, and I lock my door, and I feel like in my own world, or I can go out of it and be a participant in the other rest of it. And I belong to a book club there, which has been fun. I've never done that before, and I've read quite several books, and every once in a while that's how I spend my whole day, or most of it, like you used to do.
Yeah, I still do. Yeah.
So, and then I go to Bible study one day, and I go to a prayer group one day, and this is in the building with just a handful of women that I've gotten acquainted with, and that is really special to feel like I have some sisters. Mm-hmm. And then I go to an 8 o'clock exercise class, which is in the next block at a gym. Mm-hmm. And I've done that for over 10 years. Yeah. So I have a routine that I do, and I like to watch the news, so I take my one meal a day there at lunchtime so I can watch my evening news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm finding my way.
And it seems like, we can't be sure that you'll have 20 years like your mom did. Oh. But you also take steps to make sure you're healthy and
yes,
that you're taking care of yourself.
I try to eat right and exercise, and I'm not saying I'll always do that, but like I had a donut today.
We did go to the cider mills. We went to 3 actually this weekend, so we had to try them all. That's a Michigan thing to do. Well, is there any final things that kind of we haven't talked about that you feel like is important to share about faith?
Oh, don't let anybody talk you out of your faith. Hold on to what you believe. And one of my favorite verses that I quote to the Lord almost every day in my prayer is Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added unto you. And one day I said to the Lord, I said, what do you mean by other things? You know, I'm not concerned about the other things. I'm just concerned about wanting to seek your righteousness. And he calmly said to me, Jasmine, and I go, oh, that's true. That's true. And I'm very grateful to the Lord that he has led you how he has led you. And if I've had a small part, I just thank God for it. It's not me, it's him. But I have committed you to him and still do. And remember, grandparents, that's important.
Right.
So,
for your kids and your grandkids.
Yes.
I think we, from the child's perspective or grandchild's perspective, we rely on those prayers and that good wish, that you've been doing this for so long. And when we kind of feel like we're floundering, it's like, oh yeah, but my grandma's praying. It'll be okay.
And I tell some of my other grandchildren that call me grandma, not all of them come from a Christian home. And I was reminded years ago, if I don't pray for them, who will? And that has been a keeper to me, keep doing, because if it's going to be, it's up to me in some ways for some of those kids.
Yeah.
So, and when they tell me something, I say, I've been praying for you. And that makes sense to me. What you've said to me, has come about, or, I was praying for something I did not know why or what. But I've been very, very thankful for the Lord's presence. So hang on to your spiritual heritage that you have, and lock it in your heart, and make it that foundation that is a rock and that you don't let go of.
Yeah. And if Christianity isn't a heritage for you, if it's new to you, it's never too late.
Absolutely.
There's always time and to spend in prayer and with Scripture, and it will speak to you and can be living and active in your life. And that's what you've shown me over the years, and I'm so grateful for that we got to spend that time together over those years.
Me too. It's been very, very, very wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, thank you for being here today. We'd like to give our thanks to the Kirk in the Hills, especially Reverend Dr. Nate Phillips as the senior pastor. We are thankful for Joan Handpeter at Kirk West and all the work that she and the team there does as we do our worship and Bible studies and other activities, our mission projects. And thank you for participating and watching or listening to this podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode of Kirk Chats. We hope that you've found a way to engage with this in your life, in your faith, and our changing world. See you next week.